This video was originally going to be just a massive rant on why YCS Philly was a joke of an event. Just a shambolic event that no one should ever look at and say, yeah, no, that was a legit event. The people that top that shouldn't look at that and say, yeah, I topped the YCS, or Chris Leprick, or whatever his name is, shouldn't be like, yeah, my YCS win. No, it's an illegitimate event because it was an illegitimate event. Like, if you look at all the things that happened there, it was just a nonsense, right? I would have done that video mainly because of the mainstream idea that European players are worse than American players, which I've seen around with a lot of American players. It was particularly brought to my attention at YCS Berlin by Hoban, and again, like, I have nothing but respect for Hoban, he's a cool guy, etc, etc, and even though, I don't know, with me and Will it might not come across like that, we are just taking the piss. I've spoken with him, we are respectable with one another and whatnot. But at the YCS he was acting a bit stupidly, and one of the things that he said was to Claudio, who's a very accomplished European player. He said, oh, well, I guess that's why American players are better than European players. After Claudio refused to agree with him that Raigeki break was better than Warning and Bottomless. Which it isn't, or wasn't, or pretty much ever was, by the way. But that's my opinion. Ooh. But yeah, that would have prompted the rant. That would have prompted me saying, well, oh, we're worse, look at all of this. All this nonsense. But I don't care enough to do it. Firstly, there aren't enough lists out yet for me to do it, and there's no point. Like, I've a lot of American friends. I don't know my demographics, but I'm guessing that a few of you are from America at least. So, there's no point, because it's a stupid statement. Either way, it's a stupid statement. Like, oh, European players are better than US players, or US players are better than European players. It's stupid. There's no point stoking that fire. But YCS Philly was a joke, alright? Firstly, you had just weird deck lists that made no sense. Random choices that made no sense. Then you had people getting into fights. I don't know that fights happen at European YCSs. I think the last 2 events I've been to, there have been fights, and I know there was a fight at YCS Paris as well. But there were more fights here. And there was dodgy police as well, with some guy getting escorted out the venue. The cop saying he's gonna bash his skull in. What? What? If a cop said that to someone in the UK, report them, they would get fired from their job. How does this happen in the US? How does blatant discrimination happen in the US? How does Brandon Wigley, legend, like, I had no opinion on him before. Now, massive legend for sticking up for the guy, getting a squad out of the venue, and I might get banned. Random. It's just stupid. The winner of the YCS, Chris LeBlanc, cheated in a feature match. No one knew that he cheated in the feature match. No one watching the match realized that he cheated. He used Angeli twice in one turn. No one knew that the card could only be used once per turn. Except for him, obviously, because he cheated with it. But no one else. No one else was like, oh, I swear that card could only be used once per turn. And picked it up and read it. That's what you have to do, pick it up and read it. And he won. He won the event. Just by cheating. Right? Now, I can't generalize and be like, oh, he cheated to win the event. But there's evidence for him cheating. He's a pretty shady guy. And he went... That's not what this video is on, alright? Whatever. That happened. This was prompted by me seeing the two artifact builds that I've seen. Actually 3. I've seen 3 artifact builds. Alright, one was the top 32 build. One was some guy who got to round 7. And another one was from some other guy I know, right? So I've seen 3 artifact builds. from people that went to YCS Philly. I haven't seen the other ones. I know that 6 artifact decks topped. Unsurprisingly, guess what didn't top? Sylvans, alright? So that's the one legitimate thing about this event. It proved that Sylvan's a poo, which we already knew, right? I've said that before, so I've made my case with that. If you want to know why, go watch that video. Alright, that was a pretty good video. Probably my best video, actually, I would say. No, this is about the artifact builds. Artifacts are the best deck. The best deck. Alright, Gear 1, but artifacts are the best deck. I've been saying this for a long time. People have been saying to me, no, artifacts aren't the best deck. And I said, well, what is the best deck? And there's no answer. Because there is no better deck than artifacts. Like, oh, Beagalltach's won the event. Yeah, cool, Beagalltach's won the event, but they aren't the best deck. Do you know why? Because artifacts are the best deck. With artifacts, everything floats. You get to play the hands, which are great. You get to play trap chicks, which are great, as everyone is now realizing. I.e., look at the prices for Nightmare. I don't care. I've made my money on them. And you flip Sanctum, and you have a good day. They can do anything like brrr, like summon Yamato attack, you're like flip Sanctum. Artifacts are the best deck, alright? I've been saying this, but the builds that were played, I have gripes with them, okay? So, this video is not on Philly or anything like that. This video is on why Beagalltach, aka Artifact Red, and Artifact Ignition are bad cards. They are bad cards, they are suboptimal, and you need to stop playing them. You need to stop playing them right now, alright? It angers me. Really angers me. The build I got top 32. This is no discredit to the guy who got top 32. You did a good job, my friend. You represented the deck. It was legitimate. This isn't a criticism of you, alright? He played 2 Beagle. A lot of people played 2 to 3 Beagalltach, alright? Now, the reason why you run Beagalltach is fairly logical, alright? You instantly put 3 Moral Attack, 3 Sanctum into your deck. Cool. Then you think, well, when the Moral Attacks are in the deck, it's fine. When I draw them, that sucks. So, what can I do to clear them from my back row if I draw them? They think, oh, well, they printed a card for that. A counterpart card called Artifact Red. Ooh, yay, I'll put them in. Alright, it's logical. Except it's not logical, okay? I shall explain why. So, Artifact Beagalltach, in theory, solves the problem of having a handful of artifacts. Because it comes, pops them, they come out, can do cool stuff. But it doesn't do anything when you draw it. Just as every other artifact does. They don't do anything when you draw them. So it worsens the problem. Because you draw the Beagalltach, and it is worse than drawing the Moral Attack. You draw the Beagalltach, and it does nothing. Right? But there's no popping it to do stuff, because you pop it, and it pops one of your other cards. It doesn't do anything. It's worse than Moral Attack when you draw it. It's statistically worse, because it has 14 attack instead of 2-1, and you'd rather have the attack than the defense in this instance. Right? So Moral Attack is just superior to draw in every way. But it is still rubbish to draw. So Beagalltach is horrible to draw. So Beagalltach helps the problem. Yes? Yeah, cool. So, when you draw the Beagalltach, right? It doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything. So then, it defeats the point. Defeats the point of doing it. Because you're playing it to remedy the bad hands. Sorry, I got stifled, okay? I was on a roll and I got stifled. You run it to mitigate drawing the artifacts in your hands, right? But then it worsens the problem. Makes it worse. It is the same, right, as running titanial implants, which I have discussed in relation to dragons. It is the same as running titanial implants, because you draw a handful of plants, and you're like, oh, I can loan fire into titanial, yay, it's not as bad. But then you draw the titanial and it's worse. You draw the titanial and you cry. You hate yourself. Right? It is the same as that. When you don't draw artifacts, it doesn't do anything. When you draw blues and you don't draw the Beagalltach, it does something. Then you draw the Beagalltach and you kill yourself. Because it doesn't do anything. Alright? Now, you would run less Beagalltach, logically speaking, because you don't want to draw it. As has been established, it is horrible if you draw it. It does nothing. It is a bad card when you draw it. The worst of cards, you might say, when you draw it, because it doesn't do anything. In fact, if they, for some reason, are just retarded and blind MST it, and you go, and then it comes back, you have to pop one of your own sets. So you're not even going to set the Beagalltach, unless you have another artifact there. You're not even going to set the Beagalltach. You might set a Moraltach, you're not going to set the Beagalltach. So the Beagalltach just stays there, does nothing. Like, ooh, doesn't do anything, right? So you're going to be running less Beagalltach because you don't want to draw into it as much. The probability of drawing into a card that you run at 3 is something like 0.43 or something like that, right? So why would you run 3 Beagalltach? You're just maximizing the chance of drawing it. Odds are you're going to use the Beagalltach in one situation, which is when you have a Moraltach in your hand, and you're going to use it once, right? Because the probability of you drawing more than one Moraltach is not very high. You'll draw one Moraltach, and you'll be like, oh, cool, Beagalltach, I still have it, let's get it. And you'll use it once, right? Because you won't draw into Moraltach again, odds are. And then, by that point, you'd have a Durandal or something anyway. So, you only need the one Beagalltach, and you don't want to draw it. So you might as well run one, right? But even then, that also creates a bad problem, because then if you draw the one Beagalltach, you're out of all Beagalltachs. So it's like, oh, I might as well run 2, even though I'm doubling the chance of me drawing into it. So then comes the question, well, what would you run instead? Surely Beagalltach is a necessary evil, right? Because you have the 3 Moraltach. You might need a red. You might need it. So then you think, well, is there something better that you can play instead of Beagalltach? And do you need Beagalltach? So I would argue, firstly, the extent that you need Beagalltach is not very high. Because if you draw the Moraltachs, yeah, boohoo, it's bad, you draw Moraltachs. But it's not that bad. It's not like your whole deck shuts down. You have a suboptimal card, and every other card in your hand, unless it's more artifacts, which it won't be, because it'll be, alright, let's say you don't open something ridiculous like 3 Moraltach, 3 Sanctum. Let's say you have 1 Moraltach, the other cards will be fine, the other cards will compensate for a while. And eventually you might come to feel the -1 that the dead Moraltach is, but it's not too bad. Like, do you not see how illogical it is to run a dead card to mitigate other dead cards? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. Alright? But then, even if you draw the Moraltachs, it's not that bad. You can set it as a bluff. Alright? This is the most common thing that you do with it. You set it as a bluff. The only thing I would say about that is be careful, because you don't want to draw... Like, you don't want to just have it sitting there. Because if you go, like, set 4... and then you have the one there that stays there the whole time, it becomes quite evident that that's a Moraltach. So, also, if you go like set 5 and then it sits there, it can clog your back row. So what I would say is keep the Moraltach in your hand for a while. And then when the game state becomes more simplified, then just set it. And then they're more likely to MST it or something like that as well. Right? This happens. People do just randomly MST it or something like this. Like, I played Connor yesterday, and he didn't need to MST my set, and he did, and it was a Moraltach, and I won, right? He's an idiot, but still, it happens. If they MST'd the Beagalltach, wouldn't do anything, right? At least Moraltach has some use. And Moraltach is a 2-1 beta, right? You can actually tribute summon it and run over things. You can actually do that. It's not amazing, right? But you can do it. Like, against Madolche, 2-1 beats over everything under Chateau besides Messenger Lato, so... It's not optimal, but it's okay. If you have another Moraltach and a level 4 on the field, something like Mamelio, then you can just tribute summon and overlay. Like, it's not an amazing use, obviously, but it's not the worst use either, right? So it's not horrible to draw. It's bad, but it's not as bad as drawing Beagalltach would be, right? To the extent that you need Beagalltach is not that great, honestly, in my opinion. And then also, are there better alternatives? Yes, there is, and it's called Double Cyclone. Like, Double Cyclone, yeah, is a quick play spell trap, which everyone knows about because everyone played it, apparently. It's a quick play spell trap where you pop a spell trap on both sides of the field, right? So it's a -1. Except, obviously, you're popping an artifact which will come back and pop something, it'll end up as a +1, right? Or it'll just come back and even itself. So you have to compare Double Cyclone and Beagalltach, alright? There are 3 scenarios. The first one is you just draw the card on its own. The second one is you draw it with a bunch of artifacts. The third one is you don't draw it with either a bunch of artifacts. That's 4 scenarios actually. I messed that up. So there are 2 where you draw it, and there are 2 where you don't draw it. And the 2 variables in between are having artifacts and no artifacts. So either you draw it and you have artifacts, you draw it and you don't have artifacts, or you don't draw it and you have artifacts, or you don't draw it and you don't have artifacts. Right? Now, if you don't draw it and you don't have artifacts, then the card just doesn't really exist. I know you can Sanctum into Beagalltach with no artifacts, but you wouldn't do that. So the card essentially, both of them are just as irrelevant, except the fact that Beagalltach is a worse card on its own than Double Cyclone is. So you can argue that you don't want to draw into Beagalltach, while you might want to draw into Double Cyclone, so Double Cyclone is more productive in the deck. But I'm not going to make that argument, because that's too easy. So Double Cyclone and Beagalltach are the same when you when you don't draw them with no artifacts. When you don't draw them with artifacts, then Beagalltach is better, as long as you have Sanctum. Because conversely, you can draw into Beagalltach and the problem would get worse. Or if you have Sanctum, then you go fetch a Beagalltach. That's fine. Then, there's when you draw it, and you do have artifacts. When you draw Beagalltach, it is bad. Either way, you lose, right? You lose when you have... No, obviously you don't. But you are in a bad position when you draw Beagalltach. Regardless of that, you have artifacts, right? It makes it worse if you draw Beagalltach and you have artifacts. Double Cyclone, if you draw it and you have artifacts, it's great. It's great. Because you're going even or plus. You're turning the dead artifacts into something productive. Double Cyclone is really good there. And then there's when you draw it and you don't have artifacts. Beagalltach, when you draw and you don't have artifacts, you're not going to do anything with it, because you're not even going to set it, right? If you draw Beagalltach with a bunch of artifacts, you'll still set it in the hope that they might just blind MST it or something, right? With Beagalltach, with no artifacts, you're not going to set it. You're going to hold it in your hand. And you're not going to summon it, ever. It's just going to be a dead card. Right? Double Cyclone is still good on its own if you don't draw an artifact. Because chains exist. So you can activate something and then chain Double Cyclone onto it. Pop. And then it's an MST. Right? It's an MST. So they go summon Firehand. I can be like, flip Bottomless. They're like, no response. Like, chain Double Cyclone, target the Bottomless in your back row. And then it's an MST. Because chains exist, Double Cyclone is fine. Double Cyclone is a good card on its own, almost, right? Almost, because obviously it's not a good card on its own. On a base level, it's a -1, but if you're not an idiot, you can get a lot more value out of the Double Cyclone than just a -1 or a pseudo Beagalltach. But it does Beagalltach's job almost better than Beagalltach does. Out of those examples, right? Double Cyclone is 2-1 up over Beagalltach. So why would you not just run Double Cyclone? Double Cyclone is better in every scenario other than one. And the one scenario where Beagalltach was better than Double Cyclone is when you draw rubbish and have the Sanctum. And don't draw the Beagalltach. So that's 3 things that is conditional on. Right? Those are 3 things that need to be in place in order for Beagalltach to be productive. More productive than Double Cyclone, that is. Why wouldn't you just run no Beagalltach and 2 to 3 Double Cyclone or something? I don't know. I run 2, right? But I run 3 Moral Attack and 2 Double Cyclone. I'm going to post my artifact build actually when my Moral Attacks arrive, because I'm sick. Angers me. Angers me. Really angers me. But Because I have friends who haven't topped anything. I have friends like Karako Komachi who just haven't topped, and they're better than this. Like, Will came up with the optimal build for artifacts like months ago. Nothing. And then this stuff, and then people will play this. This is my biggest gripe with it. Is that people will play it, and I'll go to locals and see people playing 3 Beagalltach, 3 Ignition, and I'll be like, what are you doing? And then I'll win. It's fine, but it's irritating. It's very irritating because it isn't fun. Like, I want everyone to do well. I want everyone to do as well as they can. Doesn't make any sense, right? And then the other thing is Ignition, alright? So Ignition, in theory, seems really good because it's a +1 and gonna get you artifacts, blah blah blah, right? In theory, it seems like a better MST, but it's not a better MST, is it? Alright, so we've established that you'd rather have your moral attacks in your deck than set because they aren't productive when they're set, especially if your opponent knows which one it is, because they are not going to kill it. They're going to let it sit there and be a dead card. And it makes your sanctums less consistent, right? So we've established that you don't want your artifact set now. Ignition sets your artifacts, which seems good when you run multiple Beagalltach. It seems good. But I've just told you why Beagalltach is inferior to Double Cyclone. It is a bad card. So then the less Beagalltach you run, the worse Ignition becomes, because setting your artifacts directly from your deck has no value. You're not going to set a Beagalltach from your deck, because Beagalltach is the worst. You're going to set a Moraltach, because Moraltach is the only one that you want. Which answers the whole dilemma, actually. Moraltach is the only one you want. Then you set the Moraltach, and then you're banking on Sanctum into red, and them not having a Nightmare or a Breakthrough or whatever, in order for that Ignition to be productive. Granted, you could do some weird stuff like, oh, if I draw Beagalltach and Ignition, I can pop the Beagalltach and set the Moraltach, and then use Beagalltach to pop the Moraltach and boom, right? Which is a +1, technically. Technically, it's a +1, assuming you pop something with a Moraltach. Oh, excuse me, my hay fever is killing me. Oh. But that is conditional on drawing the Beagalltach, which you don't want to do. And also, it isn't even that great, even though it is a +1, right? Because you're trading 2 cards for 2 monsters that, like, aren't super productive. So it's like, the things that you are trading in, you're simplifying your own game state, essentially, even though you don't lose any cards. Say that those 2 cards were back row instead. Those cards would reduce the number of cards that they have and, like, mutually simplify. Well, with this, you're just simplifying yourself. You're getting monsters. That's, like, cool, but it doesn't. It isn't. It's difficult to explain. When I say productive, it is productive in an advantage sense, but it's not productive in terms of what you would rather have. You wouldn't rather have random monsters than back row most of the time. Especially things like, especially something like Beagalltach. Moraltach maybe, but Beagalltach no. Yeah. Ignition just becomes a lot worse when you start dropping Beagalltach, because you don't want to set the artifacts anymore. The best artifact ratio, right, is just 3 Moraltach, 3 Ignition. That's all you need. That is all you need. You might play a Scythe, but you don't need anything else. So I've just explained why Beagalltach is bad. What else are you going to run? Caduceus? No. Fail Knight or Naught or whatever? No. You're not going to run any of them, because they are all bad. They worsen the problem of drawing into your artifacts, which is something that you don't want to do. You want to run the minimal number of artifacts possible at the end of the day so that you don't draw into them as much. And ultimately, what's the only one that you care about? It's Moraltach. So you put 3 Moraltach in there. Unless you're very afraid of Madolche or something random, and then you'll put in a Scythe. But other than that, just 3. But then, when you use Ignition, you're getting the Moraltachs out of your deck, which makes your Sanctums more dead. And the fucking Moraltach just sits there and doesn't do anything. So saying the artifact is bad. Then, you can't use Ignition when you have a lot of back row. right? Which also isn't great. But then you say, well, what else could you play? Firstly, you could just play MST. You could just play MST. I mean, you can't activate Ignition if you have no artifacts in the deck either. So late game it becomes a little bit iffy. But you don't want to set the artifacts. That's fundamentally why it's bad. You don't want to set them unless you're running Beagalltach, in which case you're running Beagalltach, which isn't good, right? So just set MST or play more Double Cyclone. That's the best thing about Double Cyclone, right? People are dedicating 5 to 6 spots in their deck for 3 Ignition, 2 Beagalltach, when you can just play 2 Double Cyclone and it does the same job as both of those cards in one. In one card, it does the same thing as both. Except you're getting ample more space to do stuff with. Ignition sets, setting isn't good, so don't do it. It's not good. What else? I'm just perusing anything else. Alright, if I were to give advice, right? People were looking for weird ways to combat fire and ice. Just run Deep Prison, firstly. Don't know why no one was running Deep Prison. Deep Prison's good. They attack, you banish it. They need the Lance, which no one was running Lance. Why? I mean, triple wiretap, yeah, but Lance is really good as well. It means that your fire and ice aren't going to die to things like Deep Prison, which you should be playing. Doesn't make any sense. Another thing is Majesty's Fiend, which no one seemed to realize existed. Like, what? You summon Majesty's Fiend and you win. You win. You offer them the handshake. Because what are they going to do to a Majesty's Fiend? Any deck. Any deck. What's any deck going to do to Majesty's Fiend? Especially if you have protection. Which you should, because you should be running 3 Lance and 3 Wiretap. What's anyone going to do to a Majesty's Fiend? Nothing. Nothing. No one seemed to realize that that card existed. And you can play it in artifacts, that's the thing. Because everything is tribute fodder. Everything. That's a separate gripe. I don't mind, obviously, if Majesty's Fiend doesn't get played. That is all. Alright, that is all. Beagalltach is bad. Because it's just worse than Double Cyclone. So run Double Cyclone. Ignition is bad because it sets. Which you don't want to do. You don't want to set the artifacts from your deck. You want to keep them in your deck for Sanctum. Because all it is Sanctum into Mortag. I said this 2 months ago. I said all the deck is Sanctum into Mortag. Don't overcomplicate it with random crap that does nothing. Right? You put in the 6. You put in 3 fire, 3 ice. Or 2 fire, 2 ice if you want to. You put in Mamelios. That is the base. That is the base of the deck. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need Beagalltach. You don't need Ignition. You don't need Felnor or Caduceus or Scythe. You don't need anything else. Right? Just 3 Moral Attack, 3 Sanctum. They're both worse than Double Cyclone. So just run Double Cyclone. Alright. That is all. That is all.